Welcome to the To Be the Church podcast, where we explore what it looks like to truly be the church in today's culture. It's another Friday. I'm Tyler. I'm here with Andrew. I'm here with Ben. How long have you been on staff here, Ben?
2 years.
2 years. Andrew, you just hit the 10-year mark.
That's right.
Do you remember life before NGC?
Do I?
Either of you? I don't know.
Yeah, I do.
What? So, okay, good. Today's question is
No,
going
I'm 11 years old. I was like 1 when I got
Okay.
here. So, yeah.
Today's question is going to have to do with making changes in ministry. Let's quickly, Ben, tell us a bit about what you were doing before you became the local lead pastor of our Camas Washougal campus here at NGC.
Mm-hmm. I was a pastor, a youth pastor for about 7 years, and then an associate pastor for about 2.5 years, all at the same church.
Okay.
They hired me as a part-time junior high youth pastor my senior year of college in 2009, and then I did that all the way until I left in 2019.
You climbed that ladder, huh? Junior high, assistant,
And they brought
part-time,
me on
full-time, youth
Yep.
pastor.
Wow.
Yep.
What about you? Almost Dr. Murch?
I was at church up in
Do you
Olympia,
remember?
Spit it out.
Washington. Shut your face, Ben. I was at a church in Olympia, Washington, as a pastor there. And I can't remember what the official title was. I mean, I was basically a youth pastor, but executive pastor of youth, I think was what they did. We had like 10 executive pastors. But the youth ministry, 5 years-ish there, and then, yeah.
If everybody's an executive pastor, does that mean nobody's an executive pastor?
Yes, exactly. But not everybody was an executive passter. There was associate pastors too.
Can I be the executive pastor of
You can be
local
executive
leading
to the assistant of local leading pastors. Yes.
Every once in a while, I like to change my title around here just to mix it up, And I saw a new one recently, chief of staff. It was like somebody, the executive pastor was a chief of staff somewhere.
That's an
That was pretty
important
awesome.
role in the government.
But all right, let's jump in, get to our question. So, Brian, what do we got today?
This person asks, hey guys, I've been a music pastor for the last 6 years, and I'm wondering if it's time to move on to something different. I want to stay in ministry, but I wonder if music is the long-term plan for me. How do I know if this is just boredom, or if God is actually moving me to something else?
Yeah. Boredom. Boredom's good, man, right? Boredom in ministry. Let's talk about that.
What are you going to talk about?
You've been bored in your time here, right?
Yeah.
A few different times.
He's bored right now.
Yeah, usually, no, I'm just kidding.
So boredom is an interesting deal. Well, I don't know. You're the chief of staff. You should be leading this thing.
Yeah,
You took that journey from being a music pastor to being bored to now being in a different role at the same church.
Yeah, you took the journey from being a youth pastor to being an associate pastor. You took the journey at the same church. You took the journey of changing churches to go from being an executive pastor of youth ministry to a lead pastor. I don't know. I think my first question here, and I don't know why this changes my answer, but it does, is do you suck at your job?
Ooh.
And I think,
Are you looking at me?
not you, but just to this person, like,
no, he was asking
like,
you.
Are you bored because you've done a really good job of building leaders? And like, it's like, are you bored because like you really enjoy? Because I think about, there's the task side of ministry, there's the equipping side of ministry, and there's a flux that happens all the time. And there have been times where I've gotten to a point where it's like, I've, have so many people around me doing so much that I get bored with the lack of tasks I have to do.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, okay, what do I need to do? Do I need to spend more time with those people who are equipping or who I'm equipping, and like keep them moving on the right direction? Or do I need to like find some new stuff to do? Some mixture of that. And so, yeah, I would say if you suck at your job, like boredom doesn't matter. Like you're bored. Like I don't care.
You're going to be bored somewhere else.
Yeah. And so, but if it is, if you don't suck at your job, and so I would figure out like, is this a seasonal thing? Like, is this, let's take the music pastor, for example. Does he really just hate doing music? Like, is he done with it? Like,
could it be a matter of he's grown out of it in his own, or
totally. Yeah. He could, I mean, has he grown out of it? Is he not like doing it anymore? Is it to a point where it's like some changes need to happen in the department or in the ministry to make it exciting again, and not for the sake of it being exciting, but for the sake of growth and people,
maybe we'd say it that way. Have you hit a ceiling in your current role or your current context? And is that ceiling there? It just questions you're asking yourself. Is that ceiling there because of what you're talking about? Like, it's a ceiling placed on you by your own capacity? Or is there ceilings, maybe false ceilings that are placed on you by those in authority over you, and there's like not more you can really do there or grow there, or what? Yeah.
Yeah, I had a phone call with a guy recently who's a music pastor, been a music pastor for a while. I don't think he's the one who sent this question in. But he might be. But we were talking about.
Does he suck at his job?
I don't think so. But he and I were talking about, because he was saying this very similar thing, like, is it time to get out of youth ministry or music ministry? And I think what I started realizing in our conversation was maybe not that music's the problem, but maybe the expectation of his leader is the problem. To where he's in a scenario where he desires to equip people. He desires to like journey and be a discipler that is raising up leaders. And his leadership is saying, no, we hired you to do the task of leading music. And so because of that, like, in our conversation, and I don't know where he decided now, but I had the thought like, oh, I wonder if this is actually a music thing, like something that's like the music is the problem, or is the fact that he's an equipper who's being asked to be a performer. So like, I think that can be a thing too, to where if he takes a youth ministry job in another spot that's just like, no, dude, you do youth ministry. That's your job, is to kind of be the face of that, all that, versus finding somewhere where he could do whatever task, but with the goal of equipping people, and the expectation of equipping people might make a big difference as well.
How do you know, Ben, if it's just boredom or if God is actually moving you to something else?
I think you need to know yourself well and what idols you're often lured towards.
Did you ever get bored at Grace?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But some of my idols of wanting to be wanted, wanting approval,
needing to be needed.
Yeah, like
loving to be loved.
Keep going.
Can I talk? Or are you just gonna keep interrupting me?
I'm trying to fill in as salt to the pepper here.
Thank you.
All right.
But there is a the honeymoon period in a new church job wears off, and it is just ordinary. And so wanting that, it feels good when you apply for something and you're wanted and people are pursuing you and you get a job offer. And so if you're wanting that, and usually when you get to a new church, there's a lot of excitement about the new pastor, the new staff member. And so you have to kind of evaluate yourself. Is that what's going on here? Is I want something fresh and new and exciting? Is it kind of a grass is greener? I won't be as bored, or it won't seem as mundane. Because the reality is, church ministry is not sexy. Like it's a lot of, so I was looking up Imperfect Pastor, Zach Eswine.
Yeah, great book.
He says, as you enter ministry, you will be tempted to orient your desires towards doing large things in famous ways as fast and as efficiently as you can. But take note, a crossroads waits for you. Jesus is at that crossroads, because almost anything in life that truly matters will require you to do small, mostly overlooked things over a long period of time with him. And that has always stuck out with me. Most of pastoral work is doing small, mostly overlooked things over a long period of time with Jesus. And so if that's the boredom, is that you're not getting as much, if you're not doing things that are large and famous and fast and efficient, just know that, like, this is why I'm an advocate for laboring in a location for a long time, is like, this is a long, slow, but really important work. And you're going to spend, if you're like in our role, Andrew, you're going to spend hours by yourself studying so you can feed people on the weekend from the Word. And no one really sees that or knows that, or how much you're laboring and the sacrifices you're making. And that's okay. So That's another thing to be aware of. If you're just bored because it's not as sexy or as exciting as you think ministry should be, like it's a grind. And yeah.
Were you bored in different seasons at your? Because you were in your old context over 9 years, like almost 10, maybe?
9.5, yeah.
9.5. So that's a long time. And in those different seasons, I think we're making the assumption as we read this, and I don't know why we wouldn't make that assumption, but that this person has been in that role at one church for 6 years. They don't say that. Like, this could be music pastor at 3 different places over 6 years and thinking about moving on from music. We're assuming, and kind of coming from our context, that they're at one church and they've been in that one role at that church for the last 6 years, and wondering if it's time to move on to something different, feels like to a different location, a different role, those kind of things. And wondering about music being the long-term plan for them, you know.
I think there are definitely seasons where you wonder if your effectiveness in the ministry you're in. Like, I got to a point where I thought I was more effective in like a pulpit to adults than to youth. I felt like just as I was growing and developing, and even stage of life, started having kids, and like that role, I didn't feel as effective. I felt like my preaching was really well received when it was like more of a mixed group of ages and adults. And so navigating that, you know, like, am I on the right seat on the bus, you know, and that sort of thing. But yeah, when is it time to move? I mean, I've shared on the podcast before, like, for me, I was trying to lean really heavy into like community and like letting other people speak into my life of what they saw, what they thought. I think that's a big thing. But yeah, I don't know when because I knew for the last probably 3 or 4 years that I was at Grace that I wanted to be in a lead role at some point.
Yeah.
But I had no idea when that was going to be, and I was only in my late 20s, so it was like there's no real rush. And it was honestly when I got to the point where I was super content in my role at Grace that this opportunity came out of the blue. So it's like I'm grateful it happened that way, but I'm not opposed to saying like maybe you do need to seek things out. But I didn't seek this job out. Like it was presented to me, and then that was that gave me some reassurance that God was moving us that direction. But
Ty, I want to exegete this boredom thing a little bit, though, because you're a good test case for this guy in terms of if this is someone who's been at one church for 6 years in music and they're thinking of moving either from that church or out of the role of music altogether. You've taken that exact journey, and you have confessed to me over the years at different times that aspect of boredom, your boredom that you experienced was because you were so good at your job that you ran out of tasks so many times. And so as you were directly reporting to me over those seasons of time, I was always trying to work to, and we work really well together and have had a long time together. And some of that is our personality profiles together or whatever else, or our commitment to a local context together. But I think like, what I realized in overseeing you those years, I don't need to be challenged from outside me. I make up my own challenges. And what I was trying to, you're that way as well, I think. And so when you get bored, you just challenge yourself in other ways. You know, you create, you write, you do all these different things. And what I was trying to always do was create a context where you could challenge yourself and be challenged enough by your job that you're driven to grow. And then now the role that you've shifted to, I'm really never going to have to challenge you again, because it's like you're effectively a non-preaching lead pastor in a lot of ways of the ministry at this church, which is an unlimited amount of stuff to do, you know, as it relates to overseeing people, hiring, firing, all those kinds of things. Developing ministry culture and everything. So you're not going to get bored for a long time now in the new role you're in, right? You're not bored.
No,
you're not bored, right?
I'm trying to like advocate for 2 full-time assistants.
Yeah. So anyway, that's where I look at that and go, you know, as I'm reading this, you're a very unique individual. And so, but maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. When I read this question the first time, I thought, this is a false juxtaposition here. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but boredom you may be bored and God might be moving you on. I think
Yeah.
God uses boredom sometimes to open your eyes to what could be next. And so I don't think those things are, are against each other. It's not either boredom or God moving you on. God might be using boredom to move you on. But yeah, I don't know. I would tell this person, like, start putting some irons in the fire in your context. If you think music ministry might be getting close to over for you, hit up the youth pastor and say, could I lead a small group for 3 months? Hit up the person overseeing the whatever preaching ministry of your church and say, hey, I'd like to give this a try because I think I might be a preacher someday. And really start diving into what those things could be long-term while you're still in your context, and see, because what can happen sometimes too is I think when you put a bunch of irons in the fire, like, you may not like new things. You may not like the specific new things. You may just like new things. Yeah. And so it might just be that, like, oh, I want to try that for 3 months. Oh, I don't really like that. Oh, I want to try that for 3 months. Oh, I don't really like that. And I think that can save you a lot of time and heartache in the long run if you realize, like, okay, I'm just somebody who wants to be excited and do new things all the time. And it can kind of temper your expectations for, like you said, for that grind of ministry, that slow, methodical, like, journeying with people and journeying with God over the course of a long time in order to see slow fruit that you may never even see.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And I would, one thing that I don't have many more thoughts on this, but one final thought that I do have on it is this phrase, in praise of longevity in a context, in praise of longevity in a context. Like, I think 6 years, 7 years, if you have been in one context for that amount of time, that's a solid stretch. Not a lot of people make it in the same role more than a few years, honestly. And I mean, I've heard stats over the years of, I can remember a Tom Rainer podcast I listened to years ago where he was talking about the average lead pastor is 36 months in his role. And that's usually the role that has the most longevity. And I mean, I'm sure, Ben, you heard those youth stats over the years. It's like under a year, the average youth guy is in his role. And so, on average. And so to be in one context, in one specific role for 6+ years is super solid. I mean, that's great. That's a good stretch. But what I would, and I think, Ty, you might've been leading there too, within his own context. I think that, if you can pivot in your context to a different role, I've always, over the years, in the role that I was in, which now you're in, Ty, as it relates to ministry and staff and those things, my goal with solid people that we had on the team was to always create a context where they could both be challenged and thrive, but then where they could know that they could spend their whole ministry career, if you want to call it that, in that one place, right? So that they could come up from within and level up. And we never want to put false ceilings on people who have the capability to grow in those contexts. And so there's something when you make it past the 6 years, the 7 years, and being in my 11th year now in one context, I've been saying this a lot lately. I think it's harder at times to stay than it is to leave. I think leaving, even though it's difficult to leave, I've left the church and it was very, very difficult. The one time I did that from our old context to this, and I thought that was way harder than staying would be. But now in year 11, I think leaving in a lot of ways is easier than staying, because you get the fresh new context and you were faithful there for 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever. And so you get new challenges, new people, like you said, that honeymoon period, all that stuff. And I think, staying in one place though, where you're planted there's a lot to that. And God may not intend that for you, but I think, don't jump ship too quick.
Yeah, one thought that just came to my mind as well, because this person's asking if this is boredom or is God actually moving me on to something else. Thinking about calling, and some of the things that I've heard you say about calling in the past, Andrew, are, there's two parts to it. There's like how you feel, and then what other people affirm in you, what the leaders around you affirm in you. So I'd say to this guy, go to your leaders, go to your people, your mentors, people you trust, and say, I feel like music might be coming to a close for me. And I feel like if it is, a lot of those guys are going to say, like, I think so too,
Yeah.
And
be smart about that though, depending on the context you're in. If you're in a context where you can't, you can't necessarily trust direct report with that news. Like you may be in a context where you're like, I don't know if music's the thing, and it's like, here's your pink slip, 2 weeks, Yeah. And we know there are a lot of places like that, and so be careful and be wise. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's pivot for a minute, because a lot of people listening to this are in ministry, but a lot of the folks that are listening to this are not in vocational ministry. And one of the things, I was actually just saying this in a staff meeting a couple of days ago, is we've seen kind of a shakeup even in our serving teams with COVID and all that. When we shut down 15 weeks, some of the ministries that we were able to bring back 15 weeks later didn't start up right away, or people were not comfortable serving there. And so we've seen a lot of folks that are like thinking, hey, I used to serve just in a volunteer role in this specific area. I haven't been, and I think it might be time to try something new. And so what would you say to a person that serves in the local church about doing trying something new or doing something new in non-vocational ministry there?
What would I say to them?
Yeah. Somebody comes to you at CW and says, I've been doing this for a long time. I think my passion might be ending for it. Can you help me out? What do you think I should do?
I think part of the whole Ephesians 4, equipping the saints for work in ministry, is us helping people find their place, you could say. And it's helping them find a place where they can use their gifts and be most fruitful, and also enjoy it, right? Like I said earlier, it's a grind and it's not sexy, but there should be some joy in it if you're in the right place, if you're doing what you're gifted to do and enjoy doing. And so, I think I would just kind of disciple that person towards making sure they communicate well to whoever leads the ministry that they're leaving. And, but I don't see any problem with volunteers kind of shuffling and serving in a certain season in one place, but then moving on to something else. I think just making sure to preserve unity and those sorts of things as they transition. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. I think it's a wonderful thing to. I can think of our local church here, and like faces and names are coming to mind of people who have. We have people who have been in legitimate like deacon type roles in different ministries altogether. We also have people who have served for 30 years in one ministry, right? And I think those are both awesome. Like if you're serving, and as a Christian, you should be serving as your local church, not simply in or through, but as your local church, you should be serving the one another's, the people around you, as well as your local community as a representative of your church. And I just think you can't go wrong if you're serving. Like serve in different ministries, shift over, like you said, communicate, do it in a healthy way. Don't leave someone hanging out to dry because you're like, and don't be a serial transferer. I think when you're first starting out, and you haven't maybe grown into a role that's highly dependent on you. Serve for a few months there, checking it out, a few months somewhere else, just to kind of get your feet wet, But once you commit to a ministry, make sure you're communicating and don't shift radically on the fly, because that's not even serving the people around you very well, right? I think if you're serving, I think for us guys in our roles, we're just trying to get our people text that you and I preached recently from Luke 17. We're just trying to get our people to serve faithfully, serve the Lord. And so I think you really can't go wrong if you're doing that,
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, our goal with this podcast is to help those of you who are the church be the church. And so we'd love to hear from you. Podcast @To Be the Church is the best way to do it. You can do it on Facebook or Twitter as well. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to communicate with us right there in the comments. Brendan, Cody, Max, Brian, thanks for being here today, and we'll see you next week.